My name is Amelia, and I used to believe that family meant safety. Now I know better. It started on a Sunday evening, the kind that's supposed to feel warm and comforting. My daughter, Lila, had invited me over for dinner. She lived in a modern townhouse just outside the city. Glass walls, spotless floors, everything perfectly arranged like a magazine cover. I remember standing at the door, holding a small box of pastries I had picked up from a bakery on my way, trying to calm the strange unease in my chest. "Mom, you didn't have to bring anything," Lila said when she opened the door, though her tone suggested the opposite. "I thought it would be nice," I replied softly, stepping inside. Her husband, Daniel, was already seated at the dining table, scrolling through his phone. He barely looked up to acknowledge me. Two of his friends were there as well, men I had met only once before, both loud and overly comfortable in a house that wasn't theirs. I should have known then that I didn't belong there that evening. They had already started eating. A place was set for me, but not at the main table. It was a smaller chair off to the side, like an afterthought. I hesitated for a moment, but Lila gestured impatiently. "Seat, Mum. The soup's getting cold." I sat down quietly. The bowl in front of me didn't match the others. Everyone else had elegant white plates with silver rims. Mine was chipped along the edge. I told myself it didn't matter. I had learned, over the past 2 years since moving closer to Lila, that noticing these things only made it worse. So I stayed quiet. I tried to eat carefully, slowly. But there was one thing I couldn't control: my hands. They trembled slightly, especially when I was nervous. The spoon made a faint tapping sound against the bowl. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. "Can you not do that?" Lila snapped suddenly. The table fell silent. I froze, the spoon halfway to my mouth. "I'm sorry," I said quickly, lowering it. "That noise is unbearable," she continued, her face tightening. "It's like nails on a chalkboard." "I'll be more careful," I whispered. Daniel chuckled under his breath. One of his friends smirked. I tried again, this time holding the spoon tighter, concentrating on every movement. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was sure everyone could hear it. Then it happened. The spoon tapped the bowl again. Just once. Lila stood up, so abruptly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Before I could react, she reached across the table and knocked the bowl out of my hands. It hit the floor with a sharp crash, soup splattering across the tiles, pieces of ceramic scattering in every direction. "Stop it," she shouted. "You're embarrassing me." I stared at the mess, unable to move. "I can't stand this anymore," she went on, her voice filled with something colder than anger. "Every time we have people over, you ruin it." The room felt smaller, tighter, like the walls were closing in. "I didn't mean to," I began. "Of course you didn't," she cut me off. "You never do. But it keeps happening." One of the men at the table laughed. "Damn, Lila, that was intense." Daniel didn't say anything. He just kept eating. That hurt more than anything. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking so badly, I had to press them against my knees to steady them. "Clean it up," Lila said coldly. "And please use the cheap towels, not the good ones." For a moment, I thought about refusing. I thought about standing up, about reminding her that I was her mother, that I had raised her, that I deserved at least a shred of respect. But the words never came. Instead, I slowly slid off my chair and knelt on the floor. The tiles were cold beneath my knees. I began picking up the broken pieces one by one, careful not to cut myself. The soup soaked into my sleeves, sticky and warm, while the voices around me resumed as if nothing had happened. They started talking about weekend plans, about a new car Daniel wanted, about a vacation they were considering. No one spoke to me. No one even looked at me. I might as well have been invisible. As I reached for the last piece of ceramic, I caught my reflection in the glass cabinet nearby. For a second, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me, small, hunched, covered in stains. When did I become her? I finished cleaning and stood up slowly, my back aching. No one acknowledged it. "I'm going to lie down," I said quietly. Lila waved her hand dismissively. "Do whatever you want." I walked down the hallway to the guest room, the one they had given me when I first moved in temporarily. 2 years later, I was still there. The room was small.
Bara.
It used to be Daniel's storage space. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands. They were still trembling. I tried to remember when things had changed between me and Lila. She hadn't always been like this. Or maybe she had, and I just hadn't wanted to see it. There were signs. Small ones at first. Impatience. Sharp words. Little moments where kindness was replaced with irritation. I had ignored them all, because that's what mothers do. We forgive. We excuse. We endure. From the dining room, I could hear laughter.
Loud. Carefree.
Like nothing had happened. I lay down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in my own family. And for the first time, I wondered what would happen if I stopped pretending everything was okay. The next morning felt unnaturally quiet, as if the house itself was holding its breath after what had happened the night before. I woke up earlier than usual, long before Lila or Daniel, and for a while I just lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of that dinner in my mind. The crash of the bowl, the sound of laughter, the look on my daughter's face, it all clung to me like something I couldn't wash off. Eventually, I forced myself to get up. I moved slowly, carefully, as if any sudden motion might break whatever fragile piece remained. In the kitchen, I made myself a simple breakfast, toast and tea, and cleaned everything immediately after, making sure not to leave a single crumb behind. That had become routine for me. Invisible, quiet, careful. That was how I survived in this house. Lila and Daniel left without saying much. Lila barely looked at me, and Daniel muttered a quick morning as he grabbed his keys. The door shut behind them, and just like that, I was alone. Completely alone. I stood in the middle of the kitchen for a moment, listening to the silence. It was strange. This house was always so full of tension when they were here, but without them, it felt hollow, almost unfamiliar. I walked over to the sink and started washing a cup that was already clean just to give my hands something to do. At exactly 10:15 a.m., there was a knock at the door. It wasn't loud, but it was firm, precise. I froze. We never had visitors. Not for me, at least. Lila didn't like unexpected interruptions, and no one ever came asking for me anyway. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, pretending I hadn't heard anything. But the knock came again, steady, deliberate. I wiped my hands on a towel and slowly walked toward the door. Through the peephole, I saw a man standing on the porch. He was dressed in a dark suit, holding a leather briefcase. He stood straight, composed, like someone used to being taken seriously. Something about him made my stomach tighten. I opened the door halfway. "Yes," I asked ostorozhno. "Good morning. Are you Amelia?" he asked, his voice calm and professional. "Yes, that's me. My name is Jonathan Hale. I'm an attorney. I was hoping to speak with Ms. Lila Carter." My heart skipped. "She's not home," I said quickly. "She's at work." Is something wrong?" He studied my face for a moment, and something in his expression softened. "No, nothing like that. But what I need to discuss concerns you as well. May I come in?" I hesitated. Every instinct told me to say no. Lila wouldn't like it. She hated strangers in her house, especially when she wasn't there. But something else, something deeper, told me this mattered. So I stepped aside.
Right, come in.
He entered the living room, looking around briefly before taking a seat when I gestured toward the couch. I sat across from him, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Mrs. Amelia, he began, placing his briefcase on the table and opening it. I've been trying to contact your daughter for several weeks now. She hasn't responded to my calls or emails. She doesn't answer unknown numbers, I said quietly. Yes, I gathered that, he replied with a slight nod. That's why I'm here in person. A pause. Then he looked directly at me. This concerns a legal matter involving your late husband. My breath caught. My husband, I repeated, but he passed away years ago. Everything was already settled. That's true, he said. However, there was an additional arrangement made privately, separate from the primary estate. I felt my chest tighten. I don't understand. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder.
Thick.
Official. Your husband established a trust fund several years before his passing. It was specifically intended for your daughter. For Lila? I whispered.
Yes.
The amount is substantial. How much? I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Approximately $500,000. The room seemed to tilt. That's impossible, I said. He never told me about anything like that. He intended it to remain confidential, Jonathan replied calmly. Until now. My hands started trembling again. Why now?
He paused.
Because the trust includes a condition. A cold feeling spread through me. What kind of condition? He looked at me carefully, choosing his words. The inheritance depends on how your daughter treats you. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. I'm sorry, what? There is a clause, he continued, stating that if your daughter is found to have mistreated you emotionally, psychologically, or otherwise, the trust is void. The funds would then be transferred to you instead. Silence filled the room. I couldn't breathe. He did that? I whispered. Yes. But why would he? Because he was concerned, Jonathan said gently. He believed that as you grew older, you might become vulnerable, and he wanted to ensure you would be treated with dignity. My vision blurred. He knew, I said, barely audible. I believe he suspected, Jonathan replied. I pressed my hands together, trying to steady myself. And what happens now? That depends, he said. The clause can be activated in several ways. One of them is a formal review process. Interviews, observations, evaluations. And who decides? I asked. He held my gaze. You do. The words hit me harder than anything else. Me?
Yes.
Your husband gave you full authority. If you believe you've been mistreated, you can request an investigation. If the findings confirm it, the trust is redirected to you. My mind raced. The broken bowl. The laughter. The word disgusting echoing in my head. I swallowed hard. And if I say nothing? Then your daughter receives the inheritance without review. I sat there, completely still. I see. Jonathan reached back into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. There's also this, he said, handing it to me. A letter from your husband. He asked that you receive it if this situation ever arose. My fingers trembled as I took it. I recognized the handwriting instantly. I hadn't seen it in years. Take your time, Jonathan said, standing up. You don't have to decide anything today, but I would advise you to think carefully about your situation. He placed a business card on the table. When you're ready, contact me. I nodded, unable to speak. He walked to the door, then paused. One more thing, he said quietly. You deserve to feel safe in your own home. And then he left. The door closed behind him, and I was alone again. But everything had changed. I looked down at the envelope in my hands. My husband's handwriting. A message from the past. a truth I had never been meant to ignore. And for the first time in a very long time, I realized I had a choice. I didn't open the letter right away. For a long time, I just sat there on the couch, holding it in my hands, tracing the familiar curves of his handwriting with my fingers, as if that alone could bring him back for a moment. My husband had always written in the same neat, steady way, careful, deliberate, like every word mattered. And now here I was, years after losing him, staring at a message he had left behind for a future he had somehow predicted. That thought unsettled me more than anything else. He had known, or at least, he had feared enough to prepare for it. I finally stood up and went to my room, closing the door softly behind me as if I were about to do something secret. Maybe I was. I sat on the edge of the bed, the same bed that had never quite felt like mine, and carefully opened the envelope. Inside were several pages, folded with precision. I took a deep breath before unfolding them. "My dearest Amelia," it began. Just reading those words made my throat tighten. He had always called me that, never just Amelia, always my dearest Amelia, even after decades of marriage. I kept reading. "If you are holding this letter, then it means you are living under the same roof as Lila, and something in my heart tells me that things are not as they should be." My hands trembled. He continued, line after line, each sentence cutting deeper than the last, not because it was cruel, but because it was true. "I have watched our daughter grow into a strong, intelligent woman, but I have also seen parts of her that worried me. A lack of patience, a tendency to place her own comfort above the feelings of others. You always believed she would outgrow it. I hope you were right, but I prepared for the possibility that you were not." I had to stop reading for a moment. My vision blurred with tears, and I pressed the paper against my chest as if that could steady me. I remembered all the times I had defended Lila, even to him. "She's just stressed," I would say. "She doesn't mean it." I had said it so often that I started believing it without question. I looked down and forced myself to continue. "I created this trust not to punish her, but to protect you. You have spent your life caring for others, often at your own expense. I could not bear the thought of you being dependent on someone who might not value you the way you deserve." A quiet sob escaped me before I could stop it. "You deserve kindness, Amelia. You deserve respect. And if our daughter cannot give you that freely, then she must learn that love is not something to be taken for granted." The words felt heavy, like they carried years of things left unsaid. "There may come a moment when you will have to make a decision. When that moment arrives, I ask you only one thing. Choose yourself. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect." I closed my eyes. Choose yourself. I had never done that before. Not really. My entire life had been built around others, my husband, my daughter, our family. Even after he passed, I had shaped my world around Lila, convincing myself that being close to her was all that mattered. That enduring her moods, her sharp words, her coldness, was simply part of being a mother.
But now
I wasn't so sure. I opened my eyes and read the final part of the letter. "No matter what you decide, know this. You are not alone. I am with you in every choice you make. And I am proud of you, not for what you endure, but for the strength you have yet to claim." I folded the letter slowly, my hands steadier than before, and placed it back in the envelope. For a long time, I just sat there in silence, listening to the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Something inside me had shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but enough. I wasn't the same woman who had knelt on the kitchen floor the night before. I couldn't be. A sound from outside pulled me out of my thoughts, the front door opening. Lila was home earlier than usual. My heart skipped, but not from fear this time. From anticipation. I stood up and walked out of my room, the envelope still in my hand. Lila was in the living room, her heels clicking sharply against the floor as she paced back and forth, her phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, I understand that, but you should have contacted me directly," she was saying, her voice tense. "No, I don't appreciate strangers showing up at my house when I'm not there." She paused, listening.
Fine.
"Tomorrow morning. I'll come to your office." She ended the call abruptly and turned around, then froze when she saw me. For a brief moment, something flashed across her face.
Panic.
"You spoke to him, didn't you?" she asked.
I didn't answer right away.
I simply looked at her. "Yes," I said calmly. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What exactly did he tell you?" I could see it already. The shift in her tone, the calculation behind her words. This wasn't concern. It wasn't curiosity. It was strategy. "He said you should talk to him," I replied. "That's not what I asked," she snapped, then quickly softened her voice. "Mom, please. This is important." I studied her face carefully. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to read her emotions to avoid conflict. I was observing. "He mentioned something about an inheritance," I said. Her expression changed instantly. "What inheritance?" she asked, her voice sharper now. "From your father." "That doesn't make any sense," she said quickly. "We already handled everything after he passed." "Apparently not everything." She stared at me for a long moment, her mind clearly racing. "How much?" she asked suddenly. I didn't answer. "Mom," she pressed, stepping closer. "How much money are we talking about?" I met her eyes. "Enough to matter," I said. That was all it took. Everything about her changed. The tension in her shoulders shifted into something else, something almost eager. "Okay," she said, forcing a small smile. That's good news, right? I mean, Dad always wanted to take care of us."
Us.
I almost smiled at that. "Yes," I said quietly. "He did." She exhaled, relieved, already thinking ahead. "I'll meet with the lawyer tomorrow," she said. "We'll sort everything out." She turned toward the kitchen, then paused and looked back at me. "Have you eaten?" she asked. The question caught me off guard.
No, I said.
"I'll make something," she replied. And just like that, everything felt different, not better.
Different.
As I watched her move around the kitchen, opening cabinets, pulling out ingredients, acting like the attentive daughter she had never been, I felt something strange settle in my chest. Not hope. Not yet. Something closer to clarity. Because now I understood. Whatever kindness she showed from this moment on, it wouldn't be for me. It would be for what I represented. And that changed everything. The change began the very next morning, and it was so sudden, so complete, that if I hadn't known the reason behind it, I might have believed it was real. I woke up to the smell of coffee and something warm, fresh, not reheated like usual. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. It had been a long time since I had woken up to anything other than silence or the distant sound of Lila rushing out the door. I sat up slowly, listening. There were soft movements in the kitchen, dishes being placed gently instead of carelessly.
No sharp sounds.
No tension in the air, just calm. When I stepped out of my room, I saw her standing at the stove. Lila, my daughter.
Cooking.
Not scrolling on her phone, not rushing, not irritated, just quietly preparing breakfast like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Oh, you're up," she said, turning to me with a smile that felt almost unfamiliar. "Good morning, Mom." I stopped in the doorway. "Good morning," I replied carefully. "I made eggs and toast," she continued. "And coffee, just the way you like it." For a moment, I didn't move. I simply watched her, trying to understand what I was seeing. This was the same woman who had knocked a bowl out of my hands less than 24 hours ago. The same woman who had called me disgusting in front of a room full of people. And yet now, she was acting like none of that had ever happened. "Come sit," she said, pulling out a chair for me. I sat down slowly. She placed the plate in front of me, warm food, neatly arranged, nothing chipped or broken. A matching cup of coffee followed. "Eat while it's hot," she said gently. I picked up the fork. My hands were steady this time, but not because I felt calm, because I was aware. Completely aware. "Thank you," I said. She smiled again, sitting across from me, watching as I took a bite. For a few minutes, there was silence. But it wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence I was used to. It was intentional, controlled. "So," she said eventually, "I'm meeting with the lawyer today." I nodded. "I assumed you would." She hesitated for a moment, then leaned forward slightly. "Did he explain everything to you?" I met her gaze. "Enough." Her expression flickered, just for a second. "And what do you think about it?" she asked. There it was. The real question. I set my fork down carefully. "I think your father planned very carefully," I said. She exhaled slowly, as if trying to read between my words. "Yeah, he always did," she said, forcing a small laugh. "I just wish he had told us about this earlier." Us again. I didn't respond. After breakfast, she insisted on cleaning everything herself. That alone would have been shocking enough, but what came next was even more surprising. She suggested we go out together. "There's a mall not too far from here," she said. "We could get you some new clothes. Maybe have lunch." I blinked. "We've never done that before," I said. "Well, maybe we should start," she replied quickly. And just like that, we were in the car together, driving through streets I barely recognized, heading somewhere I had never been invited before. The mall was bright and crowded, filled with noise and movement, but Lila stayed close to me the entire time. She slowed her pace, matched her steps to mine, even held my arm once when we went down an escalator. "Careful," she said softly. The word lingered. Careful. She hadn't spoken to me like that in years. We walked into a clothing store, and she immediately began picking out things for me. Soft sweaters, comfortable shoes, even a coat. "You need something warm," she said. "This one looks nice." "It's too expensive," I replied automatically. "It's fine," she said. "Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." I almost smiled at the irony. She had spent years reminding me how much I cost, how inconvenient my presence was. And now, suddenly, money didn't matter. We went from store to store, her energy almost forced, like she was trying to fill every moment with proof of something, proof that she could be kind, attentive, generous. And I let her, not because I believed it, but because I needed to see how far she would go. At lunch, she chose a quiet restaurant and made sure we had a comfortable table. She asked me questions, real questions, about my past, my hobbies, even my favorite books. "When did you start liking gardening?" she asked. "Years ago," I said. "Before you were born." She looked surprised. "I didn't know that."
"No," I replica calmly.
"You didn't." There was a pause. Something shifted in her expression, something softer, less calculated. "Maybe I should have," she said quietly. For a moment, I almost believed her. But then the thought returned, sharp and clear. She's afraid. And fear can look a lot like love if you don't look closely. That evening, when we returned home, Daniel was already there. He looked between us, clearly confused by the shopping bags in Lila's hands and the calm atmosphere between us. "What's going on?" he asked. "Nothing," Lila said quickly. "We just had a nice day." He raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Dinner that night was different. She set the table properly, placed me at the center instead of the side, and spoke to me like I belonged there. Daniel watched quietly, his confusion growing, but he said nothing. After dinner, Lila even brought me tea. "I thought you might like this," she said, placing it gently in my hands. "Thank you," I replied. She hesitated, then sat beside me. "Mom, I know I haven't been the best lately," she said carefully, "but I want to do better." I looked at her. She sounded sincere, but sincerity, I had learned, could be complicated. "It's good to want that," I said. She nodded, relieved by my response. Later that night, back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and thought about everything that had happened. The breakfast, the shopping, the kindness. It was everything I had wanted for so long. And yet, it felt hollow. Not completely, but enough. Because I knew the truth behind it. This wasn't about love. Not yet. This was about something else. Something that had finally made her see me, not as a burden, not as an inconvenience, but as someone who mattered. Not because I was her mother, but because, for the first time, I had power. And the real question wasn't whether she could pretend to be kind. It was whether she could become it. The days leading up to the interview felt unreal, like I was living inside a carefully staged version of my own life. Lila didn't just change, she transformed. Every morning began with breakfast already prepared. Every evening ended with gentle conversations, soft tones, and gestures so thoughtful they almost felt rehearsed. She started calling me Mom again, not casually but intentionally, like each time she said it, she was trying to rebuild something that had been broken long ago. At first, I didn't respond to it. I simply listened, observed, measured. She bought me things I never asked for. A new robe, slippers, a reading lamp for my room. She even rearranged the furniture one afternoon, insisting that you should feel comfortable here. Comfortable. The word echoed in my mind more than once. For 2 years, comfort had never been a priority. Survival had been enough. Silence had been safer. But now, suddenly, comfort mattered. Daniel noticed it too. He didn't say much, but I caught him watching her more often, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if trying to understand what had triggered this sudden shift. One evening, while Lila was in the shower, he approached me in the kitchen. "She's acting different," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "You know why?" he asked. I looked at him for a moment. "I think you should ask her that," I said calmly. He studied my face, as if searching for something deeper, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe I will." But I knew he wouldn't push too hard. Daniel had always chosen comfort over confrontation. It was easier for him that way. Lila, on the other hand, was trying very hard. Too hard. The night before my interview, she came into my room without knocking. That alone would have bothered me once, but now it felt almost deliberate. "Can we talk?" she asked. I closed the book I had been reading and looked up. "Of course." She sat down beside me, closer than she had in years. I could see the tension in her hands, the way her fingers twisted together like she was holding something back. "I've been thinking a lot," she began. "About everything." I waited. "About how I've treated you," she added quietly. There it was. The closest she had come to saying it out loud. "And?" I asked gently. She swallowed. "I don't think I realized how bad it was," she admitted. "I mean, I knew I was stressed and maybe impatient sometimes, but I didn't think." She stopped, searching for the right words. "I didn't think it was hurting you like that." I studied her face carefully. For once, there was no sharpness there.
No irritasyon.
Just something raw, uncertain. "Do you remember what you said to me that night?" I asked. Her eyes dropped immediately. "Yes." "Say it." She hesitated, then whispered, "I called you disgusting." The word hung in the air between us, heavy and undeniable. And how do you think that felt? I asked. Her voice cracked slightly, like I didn't see you as a person. I nodded. That's exactly how it felt. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Regret. I'm sorry, she said. And for a moment, I believed her, not because of the words, but because of how hard they seemed for her to say. I know I can't fix everything overnight, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. But I want to try. I really do. I reached out and placed my hand over hers. Trying is a beginning, I said. She held my hand tightly, like she was afraid I might pull away. Tomorrow, when you talk to the lawyer, she said carefully, just tell him the truth. I looked at her. The truth, I repeated. Yes, she said quickly. That things are better now. That we're working on things. That we're okay. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was more complicated than that. Yes, I said finally. I will tell him the truth. She seemed relieved, but I could see the uncertainty still lingering in her eyes. Good, she said softly. She stood up, hesitated for a moment, then leaned down and hugged me. It was awkward, not because it was unfamiliar, but because it was. Good night, Mom, she whispered. Good night, I replied. After she left, I sat there for a long time thinking about her words, about her apology, about whether any of it would have happened without the fear of losing that money. And I realized something important. Motivation matters, but choice matters more. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Not for her, not for anyone else, for myself. When I arrived at Jonathan Hale's office, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Steady. He greeted me warmly and led me into a quiet room with large windows and soft lighting. It didn't feel like an interrogation. It felt like a conversation. Thank you for coming, Amelia, he said. Of course, I replied. He sat across from me, opening a folder. I want to remind you, he began, that this conversation is entirely your choice. You can share as much or as little as you're comfortable with. I nodded. I understand. He looked at me for a moment, then asked the question that mattered most. Do you feel respected in your daughter's home? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I thought about the past 2 years, about the silence, the sharp words, the humiliation, the dinner, the broken bowl, and then the last few days, the kindness, the effort, the change. It depends, I said finally. On what? He asked. On when you're asking, I replied. He leaned forward slightly, interested. Can you explain that? Yes, I said calmly. For a long time, I didn't feel respected at all. I felt tolerated, like I was something that had to be managed, not someone who mattered. He nodded, taking notes. And now? Now things are different, I said. Very different. How so? She's trying, I said simply, in ways she never has before. And how does that make you feel? I paused, conflicted. He looked up. Why? Because I don't know if it's real, I admitted, or if it's fear. There was a long silence. That's an important distinction, he said. Yes, I replied. It is. He closed the folder slowly. Then the real question isn't just what has happened, he said, but what will continue to happen. I nodded. Yes. And what would you like to see happen? He asked. I took a deep breath. I want to see if she can choose this even when she doesn't have to. He studied me carefully. That's a fair answer. When I left the office, I felt lighter, not because the situation was resolved, but because for the first time, I had told the truth, the full truth, not softened, not hidden, and that changed everything. The call came exactly 11 days after my meeting with Jonathan Hale. I remember the time clearly, 10:42 in the morning, because I had just finished watering the small plants I kept by the window, the only corner of the house that had ever truly felt like mine. The phone rang once, and my heart tightened in a way I hadn't expected. I knew it was him before I even picked up. Amelia. Jonathan's calm voice came through the line. Thank you for taking my call. I'd like you to come in today if possible. I have the results. For a moment, I didn't answer. Not because I was surprised, but because I understood that whatever he was about to say would change everything. Again. I'll be there, I said. Lila was in the kitchen when I came out of my room. She turned immediately, her expression alert, almost searching. Was that him? She asked. Yes. And, she pressed. He wants to see me today. Her face went pale. Today, she repeated. Yes. She nodded quickly, almost too quickly, then forced a small smile. That's good. That means it's almost over. Almost. I looked at her for a long moment, wondering if she understood what over really meant. I'll be back later, I said. Do you want me to come with you? She asked. I shook my head.
No.
I need to do this alone. She didn't argue. That alone told me how much had changed. The office felt different this time. Not because it had changed, but because I had. I walked in with steady steps, no hesitation, no fear of saying the wrong thing. Jonathan greeted me the same way as before, calm, respectful, but there was something more in his eyes now. Something final. Please sit, he said. I did. He opened a file, thicker than before, filled with notes, reports, statements. I've completed the evaluation, he began. This includes interviews with neighbors, medical professionals, and a review of your testimony. I nodded. And I asked. There is clear evidence, he said carefully, that for an extended period of time, you were subjected to emotional mistreatment. Hearing it said out loud felt strange. Not because I didn't know it, but because someone else had confirmed it. Someone objective. Someone who had no reason to minimize it or excuse it. I see, I said quietly. However, he continued, there is also strong evidence that your daughter's behavior has changed significantly in recent weeks. I looked at him. Yes, I said. It has. He closed the file halfway, resting his hands on it. Which brings us to the decision your husband left in your hands. I felt my chest tighten slightly. The trust can be transferred to you immediately, he said. Based on the findings, that would be fully justified. Or, he paused, you can allow a probationary period. How long? I asked. 6 months, he replied. During that time, her behavior would be monitored. If she maintains this change, consistently, not temporarily, then the inheritance remains hers. If not, it transfers to you. 6 months. Half a year. Long enough to see the truth. Is there anything else? I asked. He nodded. Yes. Your husband also established a separate provision for you, independent of this decision. My breath caught. What kind of provision? A financial reserve, he said. Enough to ensure that you can live comfortably on your own, should you choose to leave. Leave. The word settled heavily in my mind. You mean, I don't have to stay there? I said slowly. No, he replied gently. You never did. You simply didn't know it. For a moment, I couldn't speak. All this time, I thought I had no choice, but I had. I just didn't know it. Take your time, Jonathan said. This is not a decision you need to make lightly. But the truth was, I already knew. When I returned home, Lila was waiting for me in the living room. She stood up the moment she saw me, her entire body tense. What did he say? She asked. I didn't answer immediately. I walked past her, set my bag down, then turned to face her. He confirmed everything, I said. Her face fell. So, that's it, she whispered. I lose it. No, I said calmly. Not necessarily. She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. There's a condition, I continued. 6 months. 6 months, she repeated. If you maintain the way you've been treating me, consistently for 6 months, the inheritance stays with you. And if I don't, she asked quietly, then it comes to me. Silence filled the room. Why would you give me that chance? She asked, her voice breaking slightly. After everything? I looked at her, really looked at her, because I want to know if this is real, I said. Not just something you can do when you're afraid. Tears filled her eyes. I am trying, she said. I know, I replied. The question is, will you keep trying when it's no longer about fear? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer. I don't deserve this, she whispered. No, I said honestly. You don't. She flinched. But this isn't about what you deserve, I continued. It's about what you choose to become. That night, something shifted again, but this time, it wasn't forced. It wasn't rushed. It was quieter, slower. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months. And I watched, not as a victim, not as someone waiting to be hurt again, but as someone who could leave at any moment. That changed everything. There were moments when I saw the old Lila, the impatience, the irritation, but each time she caught herself. Not perfectly, not easily, but consciously. And that mattered. One evening, about 4 months in, something small happened. I dropped a glass in the kitchen. It shattered instantly. I froze. Not because of the mess, but because of what I expected to come next. For a split second, I saw it in her eyes, the old reaction. Then it disappeared. She stepped forward, knelt down, and began picking up the pieces. Are you okay? She asked softly.
Især det her.
Yes, I said slowly. She looked up at me. It's just a glass, she added. It doesn't matter. But it did, because that moment was the first one that felt real. Not performed, not forced, chosen. At the end of 6 months, Jonathan called again. His voice was lighter this time. Congratulations, he said. Your daughter has met the conditions. I thanked him, but the truth was, the money didn't feel like the point anymore. That evening, Lila and I sat together on the porch, watching the sun set in quiet silence. I kept thinking about what you said, she admitted, about choosing who I become. I nodded. It's harder than I thought, she added. Yes, I said. It is. She looked at me. But I don't want to go back to who I was, she said. I believed her, not because she said it, but because she had proven it. Slowly, day by day.
I'm glad it er blevet.
She reached for my hand, hesitating for just a second before taking it. I love you, Mom, she said. I squeezed her hand gently. I know, I said. And this time, it felt true. Not perfect, not complete, but real. Because in the end, it wasn't the money that changed her. It was the choice she made, every single day, to become someone better.